So we're still talking about the anatomy of the heart. And again, in the medical conditions, I'm not going to go too deep into it because unless you guys want to understand or something, but otherwise, it's just an idea. If there is an issue, we can remove the artery that's been blocked, replace it with something else. There is also something called CABG or coronary artery bypass graft. It's another form of a graft. We take it from another part, or we do a bypass. Like instead of removing it, if this area is blocked, we just get something to bypass it. Start from before the obstruction and go to bypass it, and that's it. So the conduction system of the heartbeat by definition is a single cardiac contraction. The heart contract, and the heart contract like this. Look at this. These are the atria on top, and these are the ventricles. The heart does not contract like this. No, it contracts like this. It alternates. It cannot contract both of them at the same time because when the atria contract, it pushes the blood into the ventricles. And then when the ventricle contracts, it pushes the blood out and the atria relax to get more blood. Did you get the idea of alternation like this? It always happens like this. So alternation, atria, ventricles, this is one beat. Okay? It's alternate like this. The cardiac muscles itself, from the name, it's muscles. So muscles contract and relax, right? Just like any other muscle. But there are parts of these muscles that changed and become specialized in order to start and conduct the electrical, or basically conduct the electrical signal. We call it autorhythmic cells. So there are contractile cells, all these muscle cells in the heart. The exception, few of them are these autorhythmic cells that are going to coordinate the heartbeat. And this is a conduction system, basically. So what's the conduction system? It is cardiac cells, but an exception. It is specialized cardiac cells. They start and distribute the electrical impulse. And that's why we call it autorhythmic. Auto means by itself or automatically, right? Auto. Rhythmicity means rhythm, like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. If you go 1 per second, for example, this is called rhythm. 1 every half second, rhythm. So the rhythm is equal or a fixed rate, which is called autorhythmicity or automaticity. What are the components that you need to know? We start from the SA node, which is the pacemaker. What's pacemaker? Pacemaker. It make the pace. What's the pace? The pace is 80 per minute, 50 per minute, 100 per minute. We call that the pace. So this is the pacemaker. It make the pace. Where is it located? Read the name. Sinoatrial node. It's located between the sinus and the atrium. Do you remember the sinus? Sinus versus the conus. So it's located between the sinus and the atrium. And this is where the name came from. So obviously it's up there in the atrium, between the atrium and the sinus. And then there is another one called atrioventricular. As usual, make sense of the name. It's called atrioventricular. So where is it located? Between the atria and the ventricles, right? Atrioventricular, in between those two, at the junction. Those are two nodes. The rest is just like electrical wiring. That's just conduction. The first one is called internodal pathway, and I mentioned inter several times, which means between. Internodal means between the nodes. How many nodes? We got two nodes, right? SA node and AV node. So the first one is in between those two. AV node. The AV nodes, or I mean the internodal pathway. So it's in between the two nodes. And then atrioventricular bundle, It's a bundle between the atria and ventricles. This is going to give branches. We call it bundle branches and Purkinje fibers. This sequence is very important, and you can see it in any exam. SA node up there, and then internodal pathway to take you to the second node, which is the AV node. Clear? SA node pathway to the AV node. AV bundle, bundle branches, and the final part, Purkinje fibers. These are the last branches. So what happened in these SA nodes or pacemaker cells? They have automaticity or autorhythmicity. They do a gradual automated depolarization. Do we remember the depolarization and repolarization? Remember action potential from 233? It does that depolarization and repolarization automatically. It's working on its own all the time. SA nodes alone, the rate is about from 60 to 100. The AV node can start its own, but what's the official pacemaker? If you're following, which one of the nodes is the pacemaker? The SA node. This is the pacemaker. Can the AV node become a pacemaker? It is not the pacemaker, but it can. It can do the job. Okay, it can, but if it does it, it will do it from 40 to 60. So obviously, SA nodes will always take the lead, right? If this one is charging 60 to 100 fast, and this one can do 40 to 60, by the time this starts, it's gone. So it's masked. The SA node overtake it or mask the AV nodes. So which one depolarize? Of course, it's SA node. It's faster. So this is the one that's the official pacemaker of the heart. It always starts. It's fast enough to control everything else. And that's why we call it the pacemaker. Again, can the AV node also start depolarization? It can, but it's too slow. So the SA node is going to mask it. But for your information, if somebody have an issue with the SA node, he's not going to die. Even if the SA node is gone completely, he's not going to die. Because the AV node will not find something over it faster. So it can start to give you that from 40 to 60 it's very slow, but better than nothing. It can be an alternative, only if the SA node is gone. Effect of autonomic nervous system. Do we still remember that? Sympathetic, parasympathetic. Which one is fight, flight? Does that speed up or slow down? Speed up. So it speed up what? SA node. How about the parasympathetic? Slow down what? SA node. Here is the system. Look at this. It's between the sinus and the right atrium, right here. And then look at the internodal pathway. Look at the pathway, and here is the other node. So in between those two, it's the internodal pathway. Now you're going to the AV node. The AV node is between the atria and the ventricles. And then what? AV bundle. Bundle branches. It branch into two. And at the end, it gives you these tiny branches that are called Purkinje fibers. But look at this. Can you see this branch specifically? Where is it going to? What is this? What is this? The moderator band. Yes, the moderator band. Do you remember this? You can be asked about it. The moderator band. So branch of it go into the moderator band to reach what? Why is it going like this? It go to what? To the papillary muscles. It goes to papillary muscles. This is the fast way to reach papillary muscles. Okay? Did you get the sequence? We can ask you a question like this. Which of the following is the correct sequence? And give you these spots and put it in different ways. And you need to pick which one is the correct sequence. So here is SA node. It runs through the atria. which is the internodal, until it go to the AV node, and then AV bundle, bundle branches, Purkinje fibers, and so on. Uh, I mentioned AV node does have that automaticity, and it can be, but the reason for its presence, it's not only as an alternative if something happened to the SA node, because this is extremely rare, but the actual reason is it slowed down a little bit. So if your heart rate is, let's say it's 70, the SA node didn't start 70. It start like 90. But by the time it passed through the AV node, the AV node always slow it down a little bit. And this is the other function of the AV, or actually, this is the main function of the AV node, to slow it down a little bit. The SA node charge fast. It gives you the impulses faster than what you have. If I do like this right now, if I measure my pulse is 70. Do you think the SA node is the pace is actually 70? No, it's not 70. The SA node is doing more than that, whatever the number is. But I actually have 70 because the AV node already slowing it down. Is that clear? By the time it passed through the atrium, the atria contracts, and this is exactly what I was just saying. Remember this? Atria, ventricle, they alternate like this, right? How? Because the electricity go to the atria first, internodal pathway. Do we have electricity at this time in the ventricles yet? Not yet. So when the electricity reached the atria contract. The ventricle didn't contract. It's still moving down, right? By the time it reaches the ventricles, the atria is done, it will relax. And that's how they alternate like this. And this is the reason for slowing it down. If it goes like fast, the atria will not have enough time to contract. The ventricles will start fast. We don't want that to happen. I want the atria to contract completely, finish, and the ventricle are filling. Atria is done. Okay, now the ventricle contract and the atria relax. Just like this. And that's why we have the slowdown in the AV nodes. So here it is. We start here, SA nodes, the purple, go into internodal pathway, and then you go to the AV node, slow it down, give the time to the atria to contract, and then passing through the AV bundle, bundle branches, Purkinje fibers. And if we record that by the ECG, that you need to know the components and what does it present, each of these waves. So if you go through it, this SA node will be this first part right here, before the P wave. And then atria, depolarization, this is the P wave. You need to remember this. I can ask you what the P represents, what's the QRS represent, what's the T represent. Each of these curves or waves, it means something, okay? Most importantly, P, QRS, and T. The gaps is not the most important thing. The minimum to know is these three. P, that's one. QRS, that's a whole complex. You don't have to know it in details. A whole complex is good enough. And then the T. P, QRS, T. P, atrial depolarization. Atria is depolarized and then contracts. And then this piece is just a conduction right here, going to the AV node and AV bundle, which is not the most important thing. It's more important to know the actual three waves. And then AV bundle to the bundle branches, right and left, and then to the Purkinje fibers. Purkinje fibers will deliver the electricity to the cardiac muscle fibers. Are we following? Purkinje fibers are the tiny final branches. It will deliver the electricity to the cardiac muscles. But the papillary muscles gets its own conduction through what? Moderator band. Moderator band. So then when the Purkinje fibers distribute the impulse to the ventricular wall, or the muscles, by this time the ventricles is going to start contract and the atria relaxing. So here, this is the Q, which is the bundle branches. R, and this is the last part of R and S. That's the last part for the ventricular conduction. And then the T, you will see it. This is repolarization. Here is basically the most important of this, all of this. Let me make it clear. P, atrial depolarization. QRS, ventricular depolarization. T, ventricular repolarization. Do you remember this? Don't you depolarize and then repolarize? Do you remember that curve? Depolarize, repolarize. So P, atrial depolarization. This is the bottom line. P, atrial depolarization. QRS, irrespective of the details, ventricular depolarization. The last one, which is here, D, atrial depolarization. QRS, ventricular depolarization. T, ventricular repolarization. Okay? And this is the bottom line. This is the minimum that you have to know. You have to know what does it mean. If I show you one of those or ask about it, you need to tell me what does it represent. Now we have the regular heart rhythm is different from person to person. Anything between 60 and 100 is okay, or 60 and 90. It's different from source to source, but there is a normal heart rate, and the normal heart rate is not one number. If we measure it right now and you're all sitting down, everyone will have his own rhythm. Here is 70, and here is 75, and here is 80, and here is 68, whatever the number is. That's all okay, within the range. If you go above the maximum or under the minimum rate, we call that bradycardia and tachycardia. These are prefixes that you will see it several times. Memorize it. Tachy means fast. Brady means slow. This is not the only time that you will see it. You will see it again in different systems. So remember it. Tachy versus brady. Tachy is fast. Brady, slow. Tachycardia, fast heart. Increasing heart rate above the maximum. So it's above 90. Bradycardia is slow. What do you mean slow? Under the minimum, which is 60. Between 60 and 90, that's okay. Under 60, brady, above 90, that's the tachycardia. Here is the ECG. Again, it is recording the electrical events, the electricity passing through the heart. If we are able to record it, of course, it goes through a machine that magnify these electrical, because it's very tiny, very small. But it goes from the electrodes to the machine that will magnify it and give us the shape that we see, which is PQRST. And it can help us if you see anything abnormal. The P should be like this. If you see it like going up more or going down, or it looks unusual, QRS is like this instead of being like this. If it looks abnormal, it can help us diagnosis. So here is a slide that I want you to memorize. Most important of all what I said in the ECG. This slide specifically. PQRST. And then from P to R, this is in between the atria and the ventricle. Q2 interval is between the depolarization and repolarization of the ventricles. But one more time, the most important is this slide. What does it mean? Because this is the minimum. If you don't know the waves, what else do you know? It's the waves, the minimum. Intervals is something else. P is in the atria, R is in the ventricle. So in between, this is between the atria and ventricle. Q and T, Q is part of the QRS, so this is ventricular depolarization, and the T is repolarization, so it's in between those two. And this is how it works. we put it in different spots, um, and it goes into this machine, and the machine magnify these electrical signal and convert it into the waves that we can see and help to diagnose. Of course, there are specific spots. There are some technicians that work with the ECG. They know exactly where to put it. There is nothing random. Right in second intercostal, right, left, second intercostal, third, right, and so on. It goes like this. There are specific spots that you're not responsible for. I'm just letting you know. So here it is. This is how it looks like. It's P followed by QRS followed by T. And there are some intervals from the beginning of the P until you start the Q. This is PR interval, and this is the ST interval, and this is the QT interval. I told you the most important is to be able to tell me the waves itself, the three waves. What do you guys think is missing here? I said the P is atrial depolarization, QRS, ventricular depolarization, T, ventricular repolarization. What's missing? Is it only three? There should be one more, right? What is it? What's missing? Not the waves, the translation, like atrial depolarization, P, ventricular depolarization, QRS, ventricular repolarization, T. What's missing? Atrial repolarization, yes. Atrial repolarization. Where is it? We don't see it because it come on the same time where the QRS is happening, so it's masked. We don't really see it. Yes, but the QRS come, it's big, so it masks the atrial repolarization, and this is the one that we don't see. Of course, you're not responsible for this. This is just look at it. Doesn't it look abnormal? Look at this. And look at this. It should be PQRST. Do you see this big interval here? Look at this QRS, and then the next QRS. Didn't you see this is longer, a lot longer here? Look how these are fast.
Normally, they're supposed to be spaced out between like 4 to 5, like the lines on the blue page, right?
Yes, it should be like this. Look, fixed interval. If you measure between this and this, and between this and this, it's the same,
Yes.
same, or at least almost. But look at this. This is like it goes fast, and it can happen to anybody, by the way. If you ever have this issue, a lot of people have it, and it's not harmful. Sometimes all of a sudden you feel like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then it goes back normal. Occasionally, one time every couple of days, you get this bouts of fast. It's something that happened to anybody, and it's not something to worry about. If it is too fast, we call it fibrillation. Fibrillation is this. This is contraction relaxation, right? You can go up like this. We call it tachycardia, right? How about if it is extremely fast to the extent of no time to contract and relax? It will go like this. It fibrillates. What is a contraction relaxation? There is no contraction, almost nothing, right? So do you think the blood will move? In order for the blood to move, you have to contract and relax. You don't. This is called fibrillation. If this happened in the atria, it's not really fatal right away because remember that the blood in the atrium is above and it can just move to the ventricles by gravity, isn't it? It's just above it. So if the atria is not contracting, does the blood still go to the ventricles? Yes. Less blood, but yes. Even if the atria didn't contract, yes, it's not fatal. Atrial fibrillation is not fatal. It the consequences can be fatal later on because if you don't move like this, blood can clot because it's not moving, right? But what if you don't contract the atria? That's okay. It will go by gravity. But if the ventricles are doing like this, we will die because the blood cannot go all. That's why the ventricular wall is thick. It has to be strong enough, not just contract. It has to be strong enough to push the blood to every part including brain. So if this happens in the ventricles, that's fatal. And this is where they do the cardioversion. If you see that machine, they do it in the ventricular, not in the atrial. There are other things, but that's okay. Resting membrane potential is about minus 90, which is what we talked about, uh, similar to the muscles that we talked about before. In the atria is a little bit different, minus 90. And do you guys still remember the differences between the different types of muscle fibers from 233, skeletal muscles versus smooth muscles versus cardiac muscles? Do we still remember anything about that? That was part of the muscular system. One of the things that's unique for the cardiac muscles is the presence of these intercalated discs. Intercalated discs are discs in between the cells to conduct the electricity so it goes very fast. And the purpose is you want the whole ventricle to contract, not part of it. I'm sure that you guys forgot about recruitment in the muscles. Anybody remember about anything about recruitment? You do not actually use all your muscles. Let me say this. If I'm going to carry my laptop using my biceps, do you think 100% of my biceps fibers are contracting at this time? No, not all of it. Okay? As long as it's something light, I don't need to. I can use part of it and alternate. You contract and you relax, and then I alternate. This does not happen in the heart. You cannot. Like this is the ventricles. Can you contract this piece just like this and this? No. The whole ventricles contract as units. How does it contract as a unit? Intercalated disc. This is important to remember. That's why the whole ventricles, the whole atria contract as one unit, intercalated discs, only in the cardiac muscles, because you cannot alternate. You cannot let part to work and other part doesn't work. No, the whole heart contract, the whole heart relax. And that's why we have these intercalated discs, something unique in the cardiac muscles. And also, if you remember, or let me refresh your information, the skeletal muscles was striated, like this, parallel lines, striated, stria. This is also striated, but branching. So these are the criteria. Look at this. If you look at this one right here and this, you see how it's branching? Like started two here and become three. It's branching. So it is striated and branching. And here are the intercalated discs. It connects in between those, all these muscle fibers in order to contract as one unit. So characteristics of the cardiac muscles is just what I mentioned. Striated, branching. It contains the intercalated discs. It is not as big as the skeletal muscles. Skeletal muscles are big. Does anybody remember? I'm sure most of you will not remember. Why is it big? Skeletal muscle fibers. Why it's a lot bigger? Anybody remember? Because it comes from merging of many cells. Like when we form the skeletal muscles, 4, 5, 10 cells come together and merge and make a big muscle. This is not the case here. This is a small one. For the skeletal muscles, they fuse together, and that's explain why it is multinucleated, why our cells here are single nucleated. How many nucleus do we have here? It's just one. Skeletal muscles? No, it's multi, many. Why? Because when you get 5, 6 cells and merge them together as one cell, where are the nuclei? It's all in here, right? So it contains a lot of nuclei. So these are the criteria that we need to know. When one muscle fiber or when the muscle fiber contracts, it go through rapid depolar. It's not exactly like the skeletal muscles. Do you remember the skeletal muscles? When you start and you go like slow depolarization and then fast and then repolarization and hyperpolarization. Does anybody remember this curve? It was very important curve. Okay, you start like this, an impulse come and you go slow first, slow depolarization, fast, repolarization, hyper, and then you go back to normal. Here it's different. Here you go rapid depolarization to start, and it's for the same reason. Sodium move in, and then there is something called plateau. Do we know what's a plateau? No, a plateau is going like this. Plateau, like up, down, while going like this horizontally is called plateau. So we go through plateau and then repolarization after that. So rapid depolarization is sodium N, plateau, so calcium in, repolarization, potassium out. There is a refractory period. Again, this is the same thing as we talked about before. I know that you forgot. I'm reminding you. There is a refractory period, which is the period of refraction. Refraction means refusing. So you stimulate the muscle and the muscle doesn't respond. We call it refractory. Got it? Refractory. It's refractory means it's refusing to respond. This is what it means. So there is part in which there is absolute refractory period, like no matter what you do, it's absolutely refractory. It will not respond no matter what you do. Relative refractory period, it didn't. Let me say it like this. This door is locked and you try to push it, it doesn't matter. You can push as much as you want. It's absolutely refractory. It will never open, right? But if the other door, it's not locked, but it's hard to push. Now it depends. This is relative. If you like push it a little bit, you cannot open it. If you are strong enough, you can open it. So this is relative. Is it completely refusing? No, it's relatively refusing. Did you get the idea? Relatively. So if the stimulus is strong enough, it can open. Not strong enough, it will not open. This is relative. How about the absolute? Nothing. Push, push more, double, triple, it doesn't matter. It's not going to respond anyway. So this is the absolute and relative refractory periods. And the difference that you need to know is that the refractory period here is very long. Here is the bottom line. Refractory period is very long in the cardiac muscles as opposed to the skeletal muscles. Very important. Refractory period is long. Why? Everything there is a reason that we can understand. Here is why. For your skeletal muscles, refractory period is not that long because sometimes I can carry something and go like this, right? Slow. Sometimes I can go fast. If I'm carrying something, I have to go like very fast, contract, contract, so otherwise it will fall, right? You have these options with your skeletal muscles. You cannot have these options with your heart because you're having long refractory period to protect you. Otherwise, if it is not long, you know what's going to happen? If a signal come early, the heart will contract like this. Okay? It will respond, respond, respond. The heart will go very fast, and this can actually be fatal. So that's the explanation. This is for our protection. Long refractory periods so that the heart does not tetanize. Do you remember tetany? Do you remember trepi and tetany? If you don't remember, you can the muscle fibers can contract slowly. If you send the signal faster, it will go faster. Faster, it will go more to the extent of it can tetanize. Do you know what's tetany? Did you see somebody like having a tetany before? Tetanus, like this, convulsions. This is very fast. Can you do that with the heart? No, you cannot. Why? Because of the very long refractory period. It's for our protection. It will not respond. If it responds, that can lead to death. It doesn't respond. How about if electrical signal come? That's okay. It's not going to respond. So we are protected against tetany. If tetany happen, this will lead to death. Okay. So does our heart muscles or cardiac muscles, does it tetanize? No. Why? Long refractory period. Okay. This is the bottom line. There is no tetany. Tetany means death. Can your heart go like this? How can you receive and pump the blood out? You cannot, right? You're contracting very fast enough that you don't have to have time to take the blood and then push it out. Where is the time, right? No, we don't get this, right? So cardiac muscles cannot tetanize because of the very long refractory periods. Fibrillation is abnormality. It's within the heart, not nerve supply coming to the heart. Like there is actually like sympathetic and parasympathetic going to the pacemaker, but it cannot tetanize from this. But from inside the pacemaker itself, this is another thing. It can go like faster, and this is abnormality. Here is what I was talking about. Look at this. You start from here, fast depolarization. That's one. Plateau. It's not 100% plateau. It's not like going transversely like 100%. It goes down a little bit, but it looks like a plateau, which is two. And then repolarize again. Look at how big the absolute refractory period here, from here to here. Where are your chances to get another signal? Nothing. You can go here, 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 here. Until this, you cannot speed it up more than this. Long refractory periods. Calcium. You should remember about calcium that without calcium, there is no contraction. You have to have calcium to contract. Okay? Calcium is stored in the sarcoplasmic reticulum, and the calcium is what start the contraction. As simple as this. Calcium start the contraction. If you don't have calcium, you don't start the contraction. Okay? I'm not, of course, I'm not going to 233 again. I'm not reviewing everything, but the very beginning is calcium leaving sarcoplasmic reticulum and activated that tropomyosin. If does that sound even familiar? This is the very first step. You have calcium, you start contraction. You don't have calcium, no contraction. Now, we talked about aerobic and anaerobic before. Which one use oxygen? Aerobic. And which one use the mitochondria? Aerobic. So the heart is mainly aerobic, unlike the skeletal muscles. Cardiac muscles are mainly aerobic. They need oxygen to work. And that's why if you are deprivated from oxygen to your skeletal muscles for a little bit, for some time, that's okay. But if that's the case with the heart, no. The heart muscles will die. Why? Because the heart muscles are work, or the energy that we get is from aerobic. Which, does anybody remember the anaerobic step? There are three steps that like glucose enter the cells. And then what's the first reaction that happened in the cytoplasm without oxygen? Glycolysis. Yes, glycolysis. This is anaerobic. It gives you some energy. And then the rest will go to the mitochondria. Only if you have oxygen. Mitochondria doesn't work without oxygen. Okay, is that clear? Here is the cell. You get the glucose, enter the cells. You're going to burn it. a little bit. We call it glycolysis. Glycolysis, glucose lysis, breakdown of glucose. This is what it means, right? Glycolysis. Where? Cytoplasm. Is that aerobic? No. You don't need energy to do this. But then the product of this step will go to the mitochondria and do the aerobic part, which is the TCA, tricarboxylic acid cycle, and what's the last one? Electron transport chain. There are another two reactions, but the bottom line here is mitochondria um, need to work because heart work mainly as aerobic. So you have to have oxygen all the time. Cardiac cycle. The cardiac cycle is contraction relaxation, right? It alternates atria and ventricles, but let's take one of them. You contract, you relax. Contraction is called systole. Okay, you have to remember this. Systole. Relaxation is called diastole. So it's like this: systole, diastole, systole, diastole, contraction, relaxation. This is what it called: systole, diastole. So here is the cycle. Blood is in the atria. What's the source of the blood that goes into the right atrium? Deoxygenated. What's the source? Where's it coming from? Superior, inferior vena cava, and what's the third? Coronary sinus. Yes. If you see a question like this, I mentioned it several times. You can see it in the lab as well. Okay. So all three sources bring the deoxygenated blood into the right atrium. At the same time, uh, blood coming from the lung, coming to the left atrium, is that oxygenated or deoxygenated? Left atrium, oxygenated. So now both sides of the atrium contain the blood, right? Right. Both atria are going to contract. Okay. So this is the first step. At the same time, the ventricles are relaxing. So what happened now? Blood moved from the atria to the ventricles, right? So we call that atrial systole. And then it ends. Ventricular is at this time is relaxing, and then the ventricles contract in two steps, and that's going to relax. Here is a very important point that I want you to understand. The atria and the ventricles do not actually contract like this. Contract, relax, contract, relax. It's not that simple. It goes like this. In the beginning, it's called isometric contraction. It contracts without really pushing the blood out, like this. If I push this, can I move it? I cannot move it, but my muscles are contracting. It is contracting, right? If you feel my muscles now, it's contracting. I'm trying to push. Did I do anything? Did I push it? No, I didn't push it. This is what happened. Isometric contraction. This is always the first step. So it goes like this. The atria is relaxed, filled with blood. And then the first contraction is isometric. Did you move anything? Did you push the blood out? Did you actually contract? No. You're contracting, but you didn't do anything, just contraction in place. So we call it isometric contraction. Why are you doing this step? Because when you do this, when you contract, like let me say it like this. If I give you a balloon that's filled with water or contain water and it's closed and you push it, does the water leave? It doesn't leave, right? But don't you put pressure on the water when you do this? Like, isn't it different when if I get a balloon of water and pierce it, put something in it, and the water leaves, versus if I ask you to push it and then make a hole, isn't it? If you push it, you're putting pressure on the water, and then if you make like a hole or something, it's the water will go like fast. Isn't it different? Right? So this is the purpose. The purpose is when you do the isometric contraction, even though you're not pushing any blood out, but you put pressure on the blood. So it goes when you actually contract, and let me say this is the most important. When you do the isometric contraction, you put the pressure on the blood to open the valves. to open the valves, right? What's your purpose? Aren't you contracting to push the blood out, right? That's why you contract. You contract so that the blood leave the atria, go to the ventricle. In order to do that, you have to open the valves, right? This is what opened the valves, the isometric contraction. So like this, isometric contraction, valve open, and then you actually contract, passing through the opened valve. Did you get the idea? So isometric contraction, which is isometric contraction followed by the actual systole. And when you do the opposite, same idea. Isometric relaxation followed by full relaxation. And this isometric relaxation is going to lower the pressure on the blood to close the valves and open the other sides. Do we know that the valves alternate? When the AV valves open, do you think the aorta and the pulmonary valves are opened? Think about it. If the two AV valves are opened and the blood is moving down to the ventricles, do you think the pulmonary and aortic valve are opened at this time? Of course not. It's closed until you store all the blood in the ventricles. It has to be closed, right? So they alternate. AV valve open, pushing the blood. At that time, the aorta and the aortic and the pulmonary valves are closed. And then at the end, they will close, the AV valves close, and the pulmonary and aortic valve open because you contract and push the blood out. Did you get the idea? There's an alternation between these valves. They do not open all four at the same time. The two AV open at the same time. And the pulmonary and semilunar open at the same time. What's the point I'm trying to make here? The most important part? It's not just contraction relaxation. There is isometric contraction followed by actual contraction. Isometric relaxation followed by actual relaxation. It goes like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Isometric contraction, full contraction. Isometric relaxation, full relaxation. The isometric part is to open and close the valves, just to put pressure, increase and decrease the pressure so that you open and close the valves. So here is the atrial systole, the first part. Contraction of the atria, isometric first to open these valves. Valves are open. Okay, contract, push the blood down. Toward the end, when it finishes the blood, it's relaxing now. And look at this. This is closed. At the end, it's closed. And you are going to start the ventricular systole or contraction. Does it go just ventricular systole? No, isometric first in order to close these valves. Did we get the idea? So what closed the valve? Isometric contraction. I know this part is not easy. It's kind of complicated, but I'm trying to simplify it as much as possible. It's cardiodynamics, so it's not something that's very easy. But understand it. Contract, open the valves, isometric contraction, contract, push the blood down. How about the ventricles? Same thing. Isometric contraction to close these valves and open the other valves. And then the actual contraction pushing the blood out to the pulmonary and semilunar valve. Both. Both isometrics are for the valves, opening and closing. So now ventricles are contracting, pushing the blood out, and then we start again that the blood is going to the atria, the AV valves. 20 okay. Okay. So and then you start again after the ventricle contract. You start again, atria relaxing, diastole, blood moving in, this relaxation will close the valves, and then when you start to contract, isometric contraction, opening the AV valves, so that when they fully contract, the blood moves down and so on. There is a video here, you can watch it and can help you. And now the blood pressure. Blood pressure is the pressure on the blood. Simply, when you contract, you're putting pressure on the blood, isn't it? When you get a balloon filled with water and you press it, you push on it, you're putting pressure on the water, right? So you put pressure on the blood, and this pressure is called blood pressure. Which one is higher during systole or diastole? Which one is the higher blood pressure during systole or diastole? Systole, right? When you contract, you're pushing on the blood. You put pressure on the blood, so the blood pressure increase. When you relax, it goes down, right? So blood pressure goes up and down. It's not like this. Okay, it goes up during contraction or systole and goes down. And that's why, did you measure your blood pressure before? Don't they give you two numbers? Two numbers, right? They tell you like 110 over 70, let's say, right? There are two numbers. Why? Because the 110 is the highest during what? Systole or diastole? Systole. And the 70 or the 60 is the lowest during diastole, which is relaxation. Heart rate 75, we take it as an average. Of course, you don't have to be 75. Anything between 60 and 90 is okay. But 75 is the average in that rate. And when the heart rate increase, the cardiac cycle shorten like this. If I give you the time, you do the contraction and do relaxation. If I ask you to speed up, if let's say your heart rate is 60, okay? You have the full time. Contract, relax. You have the time. If I ask you like, no, you need to speed up, make it 80. You do like this, right? Contract, relax, faster. If I ask you to do more than that, you'll go like this. So you will not give enough time to the systole and diastole, right? It doesn't take its time. So when you increase the heart rate, the cardiac cycle become shorter, especially the diastole. It shorten. You don't give it enough time, right? Contract, relax, contract, relax. Did you give it enough time to contract and relax? You didn't give it enough time, right? So it shortened. So here it is, atrial systole, atrial diastole, ventricular systole, ventricular diastole. What's systole? Contraction or relaxation? Contraction. So here is atrial systole, atria contract, isometric, followed by axial contraction. Okay? When the atria contract isometric, the valve will open. Now it's ready to contract and push it out, going down to the ventricles. Now the blood is in the ventricles. What are you going to do? Contract or isometric contraction first? Isometric contraction first, right? Your isometric contraction to open your valve and close the other valves. Okay? And then you actually contract, pushing the blood out. Where is the blood leaving the left ventricles goes to? Aorta, through aortic valve. Is the aortic valve tricuspid or bicuspid? Tricuspid. How about the blood in the right ventricle? Where does it go to? Pulmonary trunk. What's after the pulmonary trunk? Before the lungs. Pulmonary arteries. Pulmonary arteries. And then the lung. And what's after the lung? Pulmonary veins. How many pulmonary veins? Four versus two arteries, right? Okay. So here is what I was just talking about. You do isometric contraction first in order to close the valves for you. And then when you actually push the blood out, we call that ejection phase. Pushing the blood out, right? Ejecting the blood out of the ventricle. This is called ejection. So look at this. It's more important for me in the cardiodynamics, the ventricles. because the ventricles is what send the blood out or eject the blood out to the whole entire body. So understand this. Here is the blood filling the ventricle. The ventricle is completely relaxing. This is the end. It's filled with blood, isn't it? It's filled with blood. Let's say you have 100 milliliters of blood. Is that okay? Following? Ventricles relaxing. Blood moving from atria to ventricle. Moving until the end of the relaxation. The ventricles are filled with blood. Is that clear? Let's say it's 100, just any number. 100 milliliters, right? What do you call this 100 milliliter? We call it end diastolic volume. You need to understand this. What's the end diastolic volume? What's this 100? The volume of blood in a ventricle at the end of diastole. What's the diastole? Relaxation. Did you get this? Look at this. Atria are contracting, pushing the blood down. Blood is moving in the ventricles. The ventricles are doing what? Contracting or relaxing? Relaxing. So 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 100 at the end of the relaxation. What do you call that volume? The volume at the end of the relaxation. And systolic, diastolic volume. And diastolic volume. Clear? Is that clear? Okay, now I'm going to contract the ventricles to push the blood out, right? Isometric contraction. Valves are opened, ejecting the blood out. So 10 are leaving, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70. Let's say the remaining at the end is 30 milliliters. What do you call the 30? And this was the end diastolic. What is this? End systolic. And how much left? How much ejected out? You started with 100, you end up having 30. How much ejected out? 70. What do we call this 70? We call it ejection volume or stroke volume. Let me say it again. The ventricles are relaxing and the blood is collecting into the ventricles. Relaxing, 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 blood collecting, collecting, collecting until the end of the diastole. There is volume of blood in here. What do we call it? End diastolic volume. Clear? Let's say it's 100. Now I'm going to contract. When you contract isometric, valves open. Ready. Contract. Pushing 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 left, and the remaining is 30. What do you call the 30? End systolic. And what do you call the difference? Stroke volume. The volume that left, or ejection volume. Clear? You have 3 volumes to know. It's about 60 to 40. This is the average. Like you eject out about 60%, and the ventricles are never empty. It's not empty. Start with 100, contract, contract, contract. At the end, you still have some blood. It's not zero. Let's say the remaining is 40. It's never zero. If the remaining is 40, the 40 is the end systolic volume. And the blood that left already go to the aorta, we call that the stroke volume. Is that clear or not? Clear? Here is the isometric relaxation and isometric contraction I was talking about. For isometric relaxation, the valves are closed because of that, and then they will open before you start the contraction. I'm not going to be worried much about it. I told you what you need to know. And now the heart sound. You see doctors and nurses using the stethoscope and they put it in specific spots. Where do you think they are trying to listen to? Not the ventricles itself, the valves. The valves. They are listening to the valves. How many valves do you have? 4. So they put it in 4 different spots. Next time, if somebody like doing your examination, you will notice it. They put it in 4 different spots. The 4 different spots are the 4 valves. Okay? So they put it here, right, second intercostal, left, second intercostal, and then fifths on the left side, and then you go out more to the six, five, six. Okay, four different spots. What's the reason? We are listening to the four valves. Okay, and the sounds that we can listen to are four sounds. Okay, first two are the most important ones. Third and fourth are too faint. Only experienced doctor or nurse can actually listen to it. Okay, the first one and number sound number one and sound number two, when we started cardiology in the medical school, this is what they told us to do: is get your stethoscope and put it in your heart and listen to it as much as you can. Okay, so to familiarize yourself with that, double goes like this: double, double. This is first and second sound. This is actually this sound. This is a closure of the valve. It make that sound. Okay, for the AV valves, both, it does that sound. Dub. Sound like dub, dub, dub. And then the second one is for the other two valves. Goes like lub, 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 lub. This is the first and second hard sound. You need to know what does it represent. The first one, which is the dub, closure of the two AV valves. What are the two AV valves? Tricuspid and bicuspid. Both of them at the same time? Yes, it does that sound. Dub and then lub. This is the first thing that we did. Put the stethoscope in your heart, listen to it, and familiarize yourself. So we should hear dub lub, dub lub, dub lub. If you hear something different, there is an abnormality. Okay? How about the third and fourth? The third and fourth is just the blood flowing in the ventricle. It's when the blood goes like the tides, the sea tides. It makes some sound, right? You see it when the blood come, um, when the water come to the sand, to the beach, and swirling sound. It makes a little bit of a sound, right? This is very soft. So we used to, when we were in medical school, we used to say like, do you hear the first and second and third and fourth? Oh yeah, no, you didn't. You didn't hear the third and fourth. You're just pretending. You're just started. You're a student. You cannot hear third and fourth. You barely hear first and second. That's the professor saying. No, don't pretend. You cannot hear the third and fourth. I barely hear it. How can you hear it? You're just a student, right? So no, it's too soft. Very hard to listen to it. Experienced doctor, cardiologist, they can hear it. It's very soft. It's just the blood swirling in the ventricles, or the blood flowing in the ventricle. It make a very soft sound, and this is S3 and S4. The blood moving into the atria, make a little bit of a sound. The blood into the ventricles, making a little bit of a sound. That's 3 and 4. If you hear something else, that's not 1, 2, 3, 4, anything that's different, and that's why we have to remember how does it normally sound like. So if you hear something that's not normal, we call that murmur. And of course, I'm not going into the details. Okay, there are different types of murmurs, but just understand that it's four. Understand what each one of those represent, and if there is an abnormal sound, you call it murmur. Good enough. Here is where we put it. Look at this. This is for the aortic, second right intercostal. This is for the pulmonary, second left intercostal. This is for the right AV valve. This is for the left AV valve. This is at the bottom of the sternum, very right beside the sternum. And then you go out, you hear the left. Aortic, pulmonary, right AV valve or tricuspid, left AV valve or bicuspid. These are the four spots to listen to these valves. Now, what did I call when you have 100 and you contract, you push 60 out? What did we call the 40? End systolic. And what's the amount that left? The 60. What do you call the volume that left the ventricles when you contract? 60. Stroke, stroke volume, stroke volume. Okay? So is the stroke volume is the amount of blood leaving per one contraction or per minute? One contraction. What if we counted in a minute? We call that cardiac output. Okay? So 60, 60, 60, 60, 60. In 60 seconds, in a minute, whatever the blood that left, in this case, what do you think? It's a very simple math. 60 by 60, right? 60 milliliters leaving per contraction. Multiply that by 60 minutes, 60 seconds, I mean. What do you get? What's 60 by 60? 3,600, right? Or 3.6 liters. Well, this is what it means. Yes. So what's the 3.6 liters? This is the amount of blood leaving per minute. What do you call it? Cardiac output. So what's the cardiac output? It is the stroke volume multiplied by the heart rate. Because the heart doesn't have to be 60. It can be anything, right? 70, 50, 80, it can be anything. So multiply stroke volume by heart rate. That give you the cardiac output, the amount that leave the blood per minute. Um, is that amount, the cardiac output, is it fixed? The way I told you, is it fixed? Of course not. You are actually multiplying two variables, right? Who said that you have to start 100 and you end 40? I'm just giving you an example, right? This is like an average. But do you have to start 100? No. Do you have to end 40? No. Do you have to be 60 per minute? No. Every one of us is different. So you are multiplying two variables. So if you play with these variables, you can change your cardiac output according to your needs. Is it the same need when you are sitting down like this and I am moving a little bit and somebody else is moving and somebody else is running and somebody else is exercising? Is it the same? Of course not, right? The variables are going to change. So how can we change? Let's say if you are fighting, do you need more cardiac output or less? More. You're fighting. You need more blood, more oxygen to fight, right? So during systole, sympathetic nervous system is going to speed up the heart. How about the parasympathetic if you're not fighting and sitting down? Slow it down. So this is the first variable, heart rate. Second variable, or actually hormones can also help with that, like thyroid hormone, speed up. Okay, remember we talked about this in the endocrine system. Thyroid increase metabolism, to increase the heart rate, right? It increases the cardiac output. Can you change the end diastolic volume and end systolic volume? Yes. Why does it have to be 100? Why does it have to be 40? What if I dilate more? Can I get 120? Yes, I can relax more. And how about this? When I contract, who stopped me at 40? It's my needs, right? Can I contract a little bit more and push more? Can I end up having 20? Yes. So can I change the end diastolic and end systolic volume? Yes. The variables can change, both. Actually, the three: heart rate, end systolic, and end diastolic. And that's why we end up getting different cardiac outputs according to our needs. So here is the end diastolic volume, the volume of blood at the end of diastole. End systolic volume, the volume of blood at the end of systole. And the ejection fraction is the percentage of end diastolic that's ejected out. In this case, it's 60. Ejection fraction, which is the stroke volume. This is just explaining. Let me just make it clear. We don't have to go into much details. This is just explaining how you push the blood out. But when you contract, do you put more pressure on the blood or less pressure? More pressure. So the blood now is pressured, right? And this is how it leaves. And then when you relax, is the pressure dropping or increasing? Decreasing. So the blood goes in because of that, right? When the blood finds lower pressure, it go to the lower pressure. So that's what explain the movement of blood from chamber to chamber. It is the pressure. You put more pressure, you put less pressure. Okay. Um, Next is, how do we control these variables that I talked about? We said there is the nervous system, autonomic nervous system, systolic, diastolic, sympathetic, parasympathetic, right? Hormones. Are we following? In systolic and in diastolic. These are the variables, right? That you can play with. How the nerve supply go to the heart. In AP1, we mentioned the cardiac plexus. Does anybody remember the cardiac plexus? Is the heart get sympathetic only or parasympathetic only or dual innervation? Dual innervation. That was AP1. I'm reminding you that's okay. It's dual innervation. So both go to the heart, systolic and diastolic, both of them? Yes. How? Cardiac plexus. There is a plexus, a network around the heart that get input from both of them. So there is a balance between sympathetic and parasympathetic? Yes. Right now, in your heart, there is sympathetic and parasympathetic in the plexus. And there is a balance between those two. If you are under sympathetic situation, the sympathetic take the upper hand. Okay? If you are in a parasympathetic, the parasympathetic take the upper hand. Okay? Like if we both of us are equal and I'm pushing out on the door and you're pushing in. What happened to the door? Nothing. It's not going to open or close, right? Nothing. But if I'm pushing more than you, if I take the upper hand, I will open it. If you push more than me or close it, right? So this is the cardiac plexus, sympathetic and parasympathetic. One of them, there is always a balance. It's not one, it's dual innervation. We have both of them. So there is always a balance between sympathetic and parasympathetic. One of them take the upper hand depending on the situation. Now, who is telling this sympathetic and parasympathetic to tell that to the heart? Like if I wanted to speed up the heart, which one should I tell to take the upper hand? Sympathetic or parasympathetic? Sympathetic. Who is telling the sympathetic to take the upper hand? It's in the brain, cardiac acceleratory center. Cardiac acceleratory center. That's in the medulla. I think you guys at least remember the brain stem, right? Midbrain, pons, and medulla oblongata. Do you remember this? Yes. In that medulla oblongata, there is cardiac acceleratory and cardiac inhibitory. Which one go to the sympathetic? Acceleratory or inhibitory? Acceleratory. So this both of them are in the same place. It's both of them are in the medulla. But the acceleratory use which one? Activate which one? Sympathetic or parasympathetic? Sympathetic. And how about the inhibitory? Parasympathetic. So it's all about the brain. Like I'm going to fight. What's going to happen? My brain understand that we are under this situation. We're going to fight. So the cardiac acceleratory center in my medulla will use the sympathetic to go to the heart, speed up. Um, Cardiac centers. So I gave you I just gave you one example. If you're fighting, your brain know that you're going to fight, and it will give the cardiac acceleratory center the upper hand, giving the sympathetic the upper hand, and you speed up the heart. Is that clear? This is sympathetic and parasympathetic. Is that the only thing that control the heart? No. How about this? If I'm laying down, do you think the pressure will always stay the same? The heart rate stay the same? No, still change, right? The heart rate is not fixed. It changed due to variables. I give you just one example. There are other variables. What are the variables? The baroreceptors and the chemoreceptors. Do you guys remember those two, the baroreceptors and chemoreceptors? You know, you have an exam today, so you should know that the aorta is ascending, arch, and descending, right? And then what come from the right side? Brachiocephalic trunk. And in the left common carotid and left subclavian, right? So which one is going up? Common carotid goes up and splits into internal and external carotid. Internal and external carotid. How about the right side? You have the brachiocephalic trunk. Divide into right common carotid and right subclavian. So the two common carotid goes up right? And splits into internal and external, okay? At this point of splitting, there are centers called carotid, sinus, and on the aorta, we have the aortic sinus. There are two sets of receptors, one in the aorta and one in the cardiac artery. And these are the ones that are going to monitor continuously, 24/7, monitoring your blood pressure and your blood chemistry. Blood pressure, baroreceptors monitor it. What's baro means? Prefix. What does it mean? Pressure. And what's chemo? Chemistry. So what's the baroreceptors monitoring? The blood pressure. Chemoreceptors, chemistry. What kind of chemistry are we talking about? What are the chemicals that you're monitoring in the blood? Oxygen, carbon dioxide, and the third one is pH. The pH. Okay, let's stop here.